welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. The International Finance Corporation says Africa needs to double its spending on digital infrastructure from roughly $3 billion a year to at least $6.5 billion a year. This was disclosed in its new report on digital opportunities for African businesses released at the Africa CEO Forum in Kigali, Rwanda. Arise business correspondent Rutu Sudiri sent in this report.
On this very stage here at the Africa CEO Forum in Kigali, Rwanda, was a press conference that was held by the International Finance Corporation, the co-hosts of the Africa CEO Summit, along with the Jeune Afrique Media Group. And the subject of the press conference was this new report: Digital Opportunities in African Businesses. In this very chair sat Makto Diop, who is the Managing Director of the International Finance Corporation. He was flanked to his right by Sergio Pimenti, who is the IFC Regional Vice President for Africa, and to his left, Suzanne Lund, who is the Vice President for Economics and Private Sector Development. Here's what they said.
It's a pleasure to say a few words to introduce this report, which is one of our flagships. So I have with my colleagues Sergio Pimenta and Suzanne Lund. Why is this report? And if you pay attention to the title, it talks about opportunities. And if you start reading the introduction, you will see that we're talking about use. Use is very different from access. And one of the things that we learned from other important input to firms was that availability doesn't mean that people are using it. Electricity has been available in many countries, but productive use of electricity is not necessarily happening. It means that if you don't have the proper use and the instruments to be able to use the connectivity, you don't have the economic impact that you expect from that technology. So this report is looking at how technology is used and what are the constraints for a better use of technology, of digital technology in Africa.
So first, why does digital adoption of firms matter? Well, it's because there's a lot of evidence that firms that adopt digital technologies are more productive. At every step of the digitization journey, we find that their productivity goes up. We find that their revenues grow faster than firms that don't use digital technologies, and we find that they create more jobs and pay higher wages. So as we think about the future of the continent and lifting people's incomes and creating a thriving middle class, having African businesses adopt digital technologies is going to be a key part of that transformation. So in more detail, Mokhtar now mentioned at a high level, this report is unique because we don't just look at firm access to technology. Do you have a smartphone? Do you have a computer? We look at how they're using it, meaning what functions are they using it for? Are you using software and hardware in sales and marketing? Are you using it for payroll and HR? Are you using it for general business correspondence? Do you accept digital payments from your customers? And do you pay digital payments to your supply chain? And then in addition, we look at how intensively firms are using this. So even if you have access and you say, yes, I'm using digital technologies in, say, business administration, it doesn't mean that it is the technology that they always use. And actually what we found in Africa was that many firms that have access and use technology don't do it intensively. So as we look at the numbers, we find a full 86% of firms have access to at least a smartphone or a computer and internet. And then there's a drop. 63% are actually using that technology to run their business. And then there's a very large drop. Only 24% are using that technology intensively in one or more business functions. So this lays out a very big opportunity to raise the level of digitization. And as Mokhtar mentioned, it's very timely today, and indeed what sparked this research, was the fact that by 2027, the bandwidth reaching Africa through submarine cables is going to go up sixfold. And we know from past experience that when there's more bandwidth, we tend to see the price fall and adoption go up. So we are right now on the eve of potential digital transformation of African businesses. Now, what's the barrier that's been holding them back? Well, Mokhtar spoke about one of the key findings of this report, which is the cost. So we found that the software and hardware that firms use is 35% more expensive than the same technologies in the United States. And that's not adjusted for purchasing power parity. This is just in raw dollars. So that's a hefty premium, a 1/3 premium on being able to even access hardware and software for companies that are least able to pay. Now, as Mokhtar mentioned, there are many reasons for this. One is competition, one is government policies like tariffs. So this is an issue, I think, that both private sector and policymakers need to address. But there are other gaps. One is the digital infrastructure. It's great to have a submarine cable land, but then you need to build out the middle mile, meaning getting the bandwidth to cities, and then the last mile going from cities to homes. There, we estimate that Africa needs to double its spending every year on digital infrastructure, from roughly $3 billion a year to at least $6.5 billion a year. And this is a very conservative figure. It's just the capital expenditure of building that out. It doesn't include running and operating it. So, of course, a challenge is always an opportunity, and at a CEO forum for businesses, the lack of bandwidth and building it out is certainly an opportunity.
Now, after the press conference, of course, there was a Q&A, and Arise News had to ask a question. Sergio Pimenti, who is the IFC Regional Vice President for Africa, had said during the press conference that the digital gap between Africa and other regions is narrowing. Now, he got a chance to clarify that statement when he answered my question, but when he has said that, my question was, well, is it really narrowing? Because if we use an example of 3G technology that was rolled out in Nigeria in 2007, 17 years later, 60% of Nigeria is still on 2G. So my question to the panel was, well, is Africa in danger of permanently being behind while things like ChatGPT and other advancements are taking place in the West? Here was their answer. About 60% of the country is still on 2G. Only about 10% are on 3G, about 28% are on 4G, and then 0.8% are on 5G. So you have to wonder, with the latest developments from ChatGPT and where the West is going, where AI is talking to people in conversation, if we can ever catch up. Thanks.
Can I'm very glad I can answer this question, because I want to clarify what I said earlier. What I meant is that when it comes to the digital space, there's been a significant progress in Africa. Okay, now, I did use the word gap, and you're right to correct me. We need to be careful. What are we calling a gap? Is it a gap between Africa and the rest of the world? Is it a gap between the demand in Africa and the supply in Africa? But what I see is there is an increased focus. We saw an acceleration during the pandemic in terms of investments, in terms of building the infrastructure that is needed. We saw also a number of progress in terms of the usage of internet. Now, I will let the authors of the book to give you a very precise and scientific definition according what gap you're measuring. But so I see. That's what I was saying. Now, but there is another gap or another divide, and let me use that word, maybe more fair, that I see in Africa, which is you have a divide within the continent, between different countries, within the same country, between the big cities and the rural areas. So there is the disparity is actually quite significant. And during the pandemic, you also had a divide of usage between men and women that went the wrong direction. So it is a complex world. So I'm glad that I could at least clarify this. And if with your permission, Susan knows this much better than me. She will give you all the answers that you need.
There's no point at which Africa is irretrievably behind, because what you see are two things. One is on the continent, there's a lot of startup talent. There's a lot of digital talent. So when people have the resources and the education, you see fantastic startups here tailored to the local needs, whether it's connecting farmers to market sellers or connecting very small businesses to suppliers and aggregating their orders. So there are fantastic startups that we invest in. So I don't think there's any point. And the second thing I would say is, you can always adopt what's at the frontier. What's happening right now with ChatGPT is everybody's experimenting with it. So once the use cases are more clear, then any business anywhere in the world can adopt very rapidly. So I would also say, yes, the AI revolution is real. We've heard it all day. It's going to transform many different things. But certainly for a general purpose technology just in running a business, we're still very much at the experimental stage, trying things out. And so I do have a lot of faith that this could end up being another leapfrog opportunity, like it was in going to mobile phones and skipping over landlines. I mean, it could be a technology that's that user-friendly.
So there you have it. There's still a chance. Africa can narrow that divide if she focuses on her infrastructure deficits and gets the necessary capital to fill the gap. If you're interested in getting a hold of that report, do go to the IFC's website and download it. It's a great read. Rodas Odiri, Arise News.
Thank you very much for that report, Rotus. Rotus is currently at the Africa CEO Forum Annual Summit in Kigali, Rwanda.